On June 12, Air India Flight 171, flying from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick Airport, crashed right after the departure. In this, we had 242 people on board, out of which 241 people died. And additionally, 38 people who were on ground also died. We would talk in this episode from a technical standpoint of view. And for that, I have my co host, Abe, who happens to be an aerospace engineer. Abe, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Before we proceed, would you like to say something to the families?
What can I say, Shivam? All I can say is thank you for welcoming me for this episode. And I just wanted to say that my heart goes out to all the people and the families who have suffered their losses. But yeah,
Yeah. So let's start with the very basics. So for people like me who doesn't understand about an aircraft, can you just explain what are the basics of an aircraft?
yeah. An aircraft is basically made up of aluminum, platinum, different types of polymers, right? And it's like an object, a very big object that's been created in order for all of us to fly as quick as possible from one destination to another. And the whole idea is that we should be able to make enough thrust to move ahead to a desired direction. And like the one said so, for every action there is an opposite and an equal reaction, which means when there is thrust, there is drag. In between, we wanted to find lift, and that's why there is wings, this big surface area which you can see. When you look at the wings, you could also see some parts of the wings are moving. So next time I suggest you to sit near to the wing area and then look outside on the wings, and you could
Yeah.
see some parts of the wings will be moving. And these are the um, parts which basically helps the movements of the aircraft. So the basic parts, control surfaces, are ailerons, which is for right, left movements, and then on the tail side we have something called as rudders, which is for this type of movement, like yaw movement. And there is elevators, right? Yeah, elevators, and also the most importantly, like you mentioned before the start of the video, we were talking about flaps, right?
Right.
So flaps is something which is being used for lift creation. At the same time, it's being used for stopping the aircraft, and also something called as spoilers. Next time when it's been when we're landing, and I spoke about the control surfaces, right? This is attached on the end of the wings. Now you could see a very big plate kind of thing, like a plate surface, like open like this.
Mhm.
So if this is the aircraft, you could see in this wings a big spoiler like this, like a
Right.
big area which is blocking the air. The whole idea is that it will block the air, and so that the aircraft could stop. So
Right.
these are just the basics of
Okay, and then this control
aircraft.
surface is basically the flaps, kind of, which are moving parts.
These
Let's
are
call it moving
moving.
parts, right?
These are
Okay.
moving parts, which is crucial for the
Right.
aircraft.
Okay. Now, considering what happened with the Air India 171, it was in the air for 1 minute, right? And then immediately after that, it crashed. So, what could be some of the potential scenarios which could have happened?
Yeah. So 1:38 p.m. the aircraft took off, and 1:39 p.m. Indian Standard Time
Yeah,
it crashed.
unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it's been up in the air for just a couple of seconds, but it still climbed up to a certain altitude with that kind of speed and stuff. And from my understanding, that there could be several scenarios that that people are talking about, debating about what
Right.
could have happened. But I wanted to touch on the theories, which is kind of from an engineering perspective is more logical. What
Right.
could have happened? So the first thing is that it could have been an engine failure. So engine failure can happen due to a lot of other factors. First factor could be like a bird strike. So for example, the moment you take off, set of birds is being sucked into the engines, and this engines fails. So the moment there is no thrust, which means the aircraft is not climbing up anymore, which means it's just falling off. It could be a bird strike, or it could be just like an empty, complete engine failure. It seems like both of the engines failed. Now, I wanted to go into the next theory, and the next theory could be, for example, if you look into the video carefully, it's kind of absurd. At the same time, we are kind of baffled. All of us, like in the
Yes.
aircraft industry, is quite baffled, thinking that why the landing gear was still there, retracted,
Yeah,
and it
I did
was,
notice that it was
yeah,
still there,
exactly, and it was
hanging.
not taken inside, and that was very strange, because the moment you take off, the first thing what the first pilot would tell the other pilot that, go ahead and take off the landing gear, because what happens is that the moment you take off, you need to reduce the drag as much as you can, because
Mm,
you need to focus on lift, because lift is what we needed in order to climb up the altitude. And it's just unnecessary thing which is protruding the fuselage. It's creating more drag. So if you look at the video, it's clearly that the landing gear,
yes.
and probably the other reason which I wanted to put here when we.
So, but before we
Mhm.
move to the other reason, so since the landing gear was still hanging in the air, so are you saying that this could be a pilot error?
So that's what I was coming
Right.
into, right?
Okay.
Because the main pilot could have said that, okay, now it's time for the landing gear to be put inside back the fuselage. By mistake, maybe the co-pilot, what he would have done is that he would have retracted the flaps instead. So what
Mm,
happens is that this kind of adjustment could really spoil the generation of lift, which means that if you look at the video, up to a certain level it was climbing, and after that it just going into stall basically. So stall is something like this is an aircraft.
yeah, like this, exactly.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
it's like no more lift is being
yeah,
created. It's like a stagnant position, and but you're just going down.
exactly.
So that could have happened.
Right.
But without the proper black box data, we cannot finalize on such allegations,
Mm,
right? So at the end of the day, if you're saying that the pilot made a mistake, then he might have made a mistake. We don't know.
okay.
But who knows? Maybe it's just like a control failure inside the cockpit itself. That also can happen. So this, and the second theory is
Hmm.
basically, unwanted retraction of flaps could have spoiled the lift, right? So
Right.
this is the second one which I wanted to go for. Um,
Before we move to the third one, you mentioned something black box. What it is exactly?
so the black box is something like a box, like it's been colored with orange color, basically. There is a different reason for that, because it needs to sustain a high level of temperature, and that's why
Right.
it's been painted orange color. Just like a fun fact. But this is the in-flight recorder. So it has all the audio which is being recorded, like what the pilot was speaking even before the flight. Even before the flight, so it has all the data. So it's like an in-flight data recorder kind of thing. So that's why any crashes happens. First thing what people would do, like the investigators would do, is that did we recover the black box? That's the most important thing.
So it has all the data and the audios, or just the
Yes.
audio? All the data
it,
as
it
well,
it
exactly what
has.
was done.
Yes, exactly. and
Ah,
and more or less the audio is the most important thing,
yeah.
because unfortunately, even in the last seconds, it's very important, very crucial for the investigators to understand what was being communicated. Why did because the moment the aircraft took off, according to the latest news, some of the final movements was pilot calling in mayday, 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 right? And it was very strange from the ATC control. Like the people who are sitting in the ground, they must be thinking that why is this happening? Like he just took off the flight, so what's happening? And there was not much time to respond from both the ends, not from the pilots, but I'm pretty sure that the pilots were valiant fighters, and I think they would have done whatever they could in order to save that flight. But this was my second theory, right?
Right.
And the third theory is that, for unknown reason, to be honest with you, this is something which needs to be studied, and we just need to wait for a proper answer. But for the families out there, they would need like a clear reason. And once again, there is a slight of an issue of the overweight. So, for example, if the weight is not being calculated correctly, and
Right.
if the weight is way too much, like overweight, then it could also cause such a crash. And as this is from an engineer's perspective, like from my perspective, right? But these days, for such miscalculations to happen, is very, the chances are very less. Even if such overweight things happen, such kind of miscalculations happens, Dreamliner 787 of Boeing is a high-tech aircraft, and it can handle certain set of limitations to avoid the air crash.
Hmm. Um, I still want to touch on these theories because I recently read online. Information could be false, by the way, but what I have read that the governing body has excluded bird strike, pilot error, and specific role of the
Absolutely.
flaps.
Yeah.
Apologies.
So
Yes.
that's where.
So
Yeah.
so what could be, so because these are the two things you have touched.
Yeah.
The additional thing which you have said, and I believe nobody has mentioned this, overweight. So what could be the other reasons if the governing body is already excluding them?
Yeah. So now I just wanted to divert this whole topic into the actual reason that might have happened, right? So now
Thank
let's
you.
focus
Mhm.
on the exact reason why that aircraft could have failed.
Right.
So
So
I have analyzed the actual video of the footage. So first footage was, which was circulated around, was the footage that was recorded from a screen by some people.
yeah.
When we're looking into the actual reason of what might have happened, the first footage that was circulated around was not clear, and the sound was more important as well. People
Yeah.
think about, oh, bam, that's how it crashed, but all what we could hear was like people talking and stuff,
It
and we
was.
understood that, oh, you know what, maybe it was of the
Mm.
distance and stuff. But now, like right now at this point when we're recording, there's a better video, like the
Yeah.
original version of the video.
Yeah. The previous one was recording of a recording.
Yes, so that's why it was not clear enough, right? And here we could actually zoom in, and here it goes. We will put the video out here, or like the picture. So once you zoom into this particular aircraft, what you can actually see is just before the crash, right? You could see a small thing like a apparatus.
Behind the landing gear.
Yeah. So
Mm.
this is the landing gear. It was somewhere in middle of the fuselage,
Mm.
basically. And it's called as RAT, like rat. That's what people call it as. So it's a ram air turbine. Yeah. So this apparatus is called as RAT. So it's ram air turbine, and this is deployed automatically by the aircraft in order to give more power to the
Mm.
aircraft itself. So when there is a hydraulic failure, when there is a electrical failure, or even when there is like dual engines are completely down, and all the like there is no engine power, then this is the last system which could create kind of power for the aircraft, and that's why it's been deployed. It's a system which is created by the Boeing that is being deployed automatically in order to give power to the aircraft. But here is where I even heard the pilots talk about it, right? And that's what the pilots say. It did not have enough speed or the altitude or the time
Right.
for the rat to give enough energy to the aircraft
Mm.
to make it sustain in the air. So it got deployed. It's like a mechanism which is created by the Boeing 787 in order to create energy, but was not enough time to save the aircraft itself, unfortunately. So what it means that the engine failure is the exact thing that might have happened. So, we spoke about bird strike, we spoke
Mhm.
about this, that, overweight, but it looks like it's a complete failure of the engines. So, what this means is that both the engines failed with the RAT deployment. So, why people could say that, okay, RAT was deployed is because it's been zoomed in, and then clearly you could see like a thing like protruding, bam,
Yeah,
like
I
this,
did notice that.
and also there is like a sound, like a whirring sound, like this. So I don't know if you might have heard this noise from the piston engine aircrafts, like let's say old fighter aircrafts and stuff. The turbines which is on the outside, the blades. There is like this whirring voice, and that voice was heard. So which means this is what this turbine makes that noise.
Mm.
It's like for like a minute second, like fraction of a second, we could hear that, and that's where we could clearly say that this could be a engine failure, unfortunately.
And what could have caused this engine failure?
Could be of different reasons. Now people are talking about, was it fueled properly? Was it refueled properly? Because the temperature out there was 43 degrees Celsius, which means it was very hot. But it is kind of negated, the whole statement is negated because of the fact that there is this vaporizing theory as well. But, the systems which is used, the equipments which is used to fuel these aircrafts have sensors. So, for
Yeah.
example, if there is a fuel contamination, if there is like vaporization or any such problems, immediately it will stop fueling and notify the people, who is fueling this aircraft.
Right. So it could be a maintenance error.
It could be
It
maintenance
could
error.
be.
So that's where
Right.
I'm coming into, like,
Right.
but see, for now, for the time being, it's definitely very unlucky that this thing happened.
Yeah.
But from now, by the looks of it, we can actually completely state that pilots did try their best.
Hmm.
Even at those, just imagine, you just took off, you're gone. They did try their best to save that aircraft.
Yeah.
And now I wanted to jump into this particular topic where this person escaped
Yeah.
from
One
the
person survived.
miraculous. It's a
Yeah.
miracle, Shivam. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot believe that this thing happened.
He was walking
He literally walked away from
and
the
he went to the
accident
hospital.
site. Exactly. And it seems like he jumped off from the main exit. You could see this exit door, right? So he was sitting
Yeah.
there. So the moment it took off, he heard a loud bang, and then bangs, and then also there was flickering of lights, which means power shortage. Which means
Right.
by bangs, it means that its engines are failing or failed completely,
Hmm.
which means you're just flying with no lift.
So this explains the rat.
Yes, and that's where the RAD got deployed. And
Right.
so engines is what that has failed. That banks, I mean, of course, people are saying that, you know what, he is traumatized. He must be saying wrong stuff, but I don't think so. He
Right.
was clear enough. The guy just walked off the accident site, and of course, he is traumatized for sure. But with all the indications, it's leading to this particular factor where the engines failed. And this could
Hmm.
be of different reasons,
Different
Shivam.
reasons.
It could be maintenance issue. It could be a problem that people might not have noticed in the maintenance. It could be a problem of both the engines where the maintenance people might have noticed and made like a temporary fix, maybe, and that could have failed because when a temporary fix is made in turbines or anywhere, let's say a replacement of a blade of the turbine or something like that, everything has its own life. We
Right.
learned this in machine design, right?
Right.
So they might have been expecting it to last longer. We don't know.
We
So
don't know. We're
in
just
the crash
speculating.
investigation, they would give all the
Right.
details and we will
Right.
get
And
to know
how
about this.
much time does this investigation takes generally?
It depends, Shubham. So there is, I don't want to jump into the Malaysian Airlines mystery. It's still a mystery, unsolved mystery. However, there is some valuable logical reasoning that has happened so far. But what I wanted to say is, this can take ages, or this can even be concluded as quick as possible. Because in terms of journey, there is literally no journey that have happened here. Like just took off, it crashed, unfortunately. So it can take up to 1 year, 2 years, but I think the investigation would be rapid. And I do wanted to highlight that Air India, we both as Indians, we are
Yes.
from India,
Yes.
and we know how they service their aircrafts. I'm not talking about the engines. I'm talking about the things which we see
Overall
inside the aircraft.
aircraft.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's disgusting. Things have been falling apart. People just before the takeoff of this particular aircraft, 2 hours before, I believe it was coming from some other destination from Delhi to Ahmedabad. And then the footage of the situation, how it looked from inside, was posted in online. There was no action taken. And it's been going on for ages, not just with this aircraft, which with many other aircrafts. So if people are very cautious now, there is a point for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, they are very poorly maintained,
Yes.
actually. Last question before we wrap it up. What are some of the innovations or implementations which can be done from a safety point of view in order to make things better?
Us dying is like 1 in 100 million, like, that's the odds that we would die in an aircraft. So that's how safe it is to fly an aircraft. Now, let me compare it with a car crash.
Mm.
1 in 100. That is the odd chances. So which means 100 cars, maybe one of them could get into an accident and we would die, basically. So it's very safe to fly in an aircraft.
Right.
As an engineer, I can say it. We have advanced technology that is being fitted into these aircrafts. Airworthiness, so which means that before the aircraft flies, before it carries people, it needs to have a certain certificate that shows that the aircraft is worthy enough to fly. Then, of course, when you talk about safety systems, right, there is extra oxygen supply in case if something goes wrong, fire suppressor, and evacuation systems. Lots and lots of things are being fitted into the aircraft. So it's not that, if you ask me that is it safe to fly, I would say 100% is safe to fly. But obviously, and let's say you go inside, you would find literally mouse, rats in the aircraft. Doesn't look pleasant. I would say just call it off. You're not feeling confident, call it off. But in general, it's highly safe. And with all the advancements which is currently there in an aircraft, it's again, like I told about the odds that you're going to die or me going to die, right? So that's not going to happen.
Right. So basically, safety standards should be
The safety standards, it's
taken
not
properly.
exactly, and it's not like Boeing 787 Air Flight 171 did not have airworthiness certificate. It did have. However, we don't know if the maintenance were done at right places, and whether if the maintenance people have made mistakes. Crashes have happened before like that, where maintenance, like a small bolt or a screw, was not replaced properly. So there was an air crash which happened because the thread of the bolt was of a certain length, but then he replaced it with a different length bolt. Aircraft did fly for many hours after that, but then after a point it gave up, and that section of just got torn off. And there has been incidents where pilots were very skilled. And also I wanted to highlight this, the older pilots which we see now are not that well trained when you compare it with the latest pilots now, because they have flight simulators, right? And they have all the kind of advanced technology to learn. But I would still say hats off to the older pilots. They have more experience. Experience is the most important thing when it comes to flying aircrafts. 30, 35 years experience. You need to have certain set of hours experience to fly a Dreamliner like 787. So those were qualified pilots, but it's safe to fly. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Abe.
Thank you
It
so
was
much. Shivam.
very informative session. Still, we are speculating. We still need to wait for the final investigation to be done.
Yes.
And to figure out exactly what went wrong, what could
Yeah.
have been the reason. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I hope it answers some of the questions people have right now, but it's just an speculations.
Speculation,
Right? We're just talking.
Yeah.
My heart goes to the families which we are affected by this tragic accident. Without saying much, guys, thank you very much for watching, and take care of yourself and your families. Bye bye.
Bye bye.